As it is commonly believed by most of the believers currently that false preachers or prophets are usually those of outside the church, especially the religious leaders of other religions. However, the truth of the matter is that the false preachers or prophets both in the Old Testament as well as the New Testament were common from the group of God's people. This truth is revealed throughout the pages of the Bible. Who is a false prophet or preacher? As we define this and try to know about it, we find that anyone who misleads the people of God from the way the Lord showed us or taught us serves as false prophet or preacher. Now, as the Bible reveals the way of the Lord since the beginning, that it is a way of the truth, the false prophets often mislead the people of God by showing and offering the other way, which was a counterfeit one. It is surprising to know that mostly this other way was not seen to be evil to common men, as it was just, right, logically sound, and reasonable. But in reality it was not so. Rather, it was completely contradictory to the way God showed to his people. This way was not based on the truth of his word that he gave to his people. Often the truth of God's word is misinterpreted by the so-called wise men who depend on their clever mind and abilities. There is no doubt the false prophets are influenced by the devil, as it is clear from the beginning that the devil has been in the business of deceiving people, especially the people of God, in order to destroy them for eternity. This deceiving spirit of devil is at work among so many so-called preachers of the Lord at present. In the Garden of Eden, the devil deceived Adam and Eve through a serpent. It was a deception purposed to mislead the people of God into disobedience by following the other way except the Lord's way. Noticeably, the other way was not introduced to Adam and Eve as something bad or destructive, but as good and pleasing to man's eyes. This is a common mistake most Christians make, thinking every right way is the Lord's way, which is, in fact, not. The way of the Lord can be only understood by them who humble themselves to the Lordship of Jesus and seek him with their whole heart. But all those who remain unbending, arrogant, and depend on their clever mind will be deceived utterly. Therefore, now it is obvious that the purpose of the devil is to deceive God's people, for which he uses not only the other religious preachers, but mostly the so-called Christian preachers who once understood the grace of God through Jesus Christ, but fell on their way, having been entangled by the worldly pleasures that seemed so dear to them. Balaam was one such example of false preachers who knew about God, as he was a prophet of the Lord in the Old Testament. Being a prophet of the Lord, he must have been with God's people at the time King Balak enticed him for money, but he did not do so. Rather, he chose to share the deceptive ideas of destroying the people of God to the enemies, after having known the fact that the Israelites were already blessed by God. In the time of Moses, there were people in his own group who were not right with God and who often opposed him on his face. Due to such people and their deception, the Israelites fell into the sin of idolatry and thus misled people and brought destruction upon the people of God. Before the entry of the promised land, as Moses read the laws of God for the children of Israel, he especially mentioned about the danger of having false prophets from among them. Deuteronomy chapter 13 verse 1 to 17 and especially verse 6 to 11. Another classic example of false preachers or prophets in the Old Testament was Jeroboam, who led the entire Israelites, especially those 10 tribes he reigned on, to idolatry and brought judgment upon the Israelites. 1 Kings chapter 12 verses 25 to 33, chapter 14 6 to 20. He was not from another nation or religion, but was one of the officials of Solomon, who was very efficient in his work. He was a very able young man, recognized by King Solomon. Looking into the ability of management, King Solomon put him in charge over the whole labor force of the house of Joseph. Later, he becomes the king of the 10 tribes of Israel. Being a king, he was supposed to lead the people of Israel in the ways of God that David followed. But as we read further, he misled the people of Israel towards idol worship. The Bible repeatedly mentions about him, saying he caused the people of Israel to sin against God even after his death. 1 Kings chapter 15 verse 30 and 34, chapter 16 2-3, 7, 19, 26 and 31. It was not exceptional during the days of the prophets, while God's appointed and sent prophets were prophesying and preaching the ways of the Lord to the people of Israel. There were also many so-called prophets and preachers rose up who misled the people of Israel. Considerably, they were from Israel. Similarly, in the New Testament, the false preachers would rise among the Christians who would claim themselves the gospel preachers and pretend to be sheep while they are wolves within. Some of them are born-again Christians who experienced the Lord and His grace personally once, but in the long course of time, they were devoted to another way apart from the Lord's narrow way. 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 1. Therefore, now it is very hard to know them as they are from Christian groups. When we read the specific books like Jude and 2 Peter, we find that they are born-again Christians. It would be very easy to distinguish them from other religions, which can be done by any child. But it is hard because they are Christians and use the Bible as their supporting document. Distinguishing the false preachers from Christian preachers is really hard. Whom to believe and whom not to is a confusion. However, if we follow what Jesus said and stick on to Him, we will surely be able to know them through their fruits. We ought to come out of this wrong belief that the false preachers are from the other religious people. Knowing the Lord and His teachings will help us more to be away from every stain of these false teachers who can destroy us through their false teachings by leading us away from God's love. So my dear brothers and sisters, may the Lord help you and me to follow the Lord wholeheartedly in these difficult times. Amen.